Okay, it's recording, and I'm going to start letting people in. Okay, slow but sure. Everybody's entering the Zoom. Evening, everyone. We're going to wait a few seconds to let everybody come into the Zoom. And when that number slows down, we'll get started. Okay. Well, thank you for joining our safety workshop this evening. I want to take a minute to thank our Parent Association Safety Committee chairpersons, Corey Salvett and Melissa Lee, for bringing to our attention the need for this workshop tonight and for their continued collaboration, as well as the entire Parent Association, our co-presidents, and our executive board. We're grateful for your continued support and your partnership. So tonight, we'll be having a meeting about safety, share some tips, share communication protocols, and also some protocols on well-being. But to get us started tonight, I'll turn it over to Dr. Seung, our principal.
Thank you, Ms. Ingram. Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight to offer our workshop on safety. This is something that's really important for us. We've prioritized student well-being as well as staff well-being, particularly as we're kind of getting on the tail end of COVID. And because of all the things that happen across the city, we want to make sure that our young people feel safe, secure, to be able to be their very best during school. So tonight, we want to make sure that we talk overall about student well-being, whether that's physical safety and health, whether that's social, emotional, cognitively. There's a whole spectrum of considerations that we think about when we think about our young people and positioning them to be the very best they can be. Over the course of this school year, our job is to make sure that our students and our staff can be at their very best. And that starts with making sure that we create a safe environment for students physically, social, emotionally, cognitively. And again, as we think about all of the different aspects of school and the environment itself, we always want to think about the ways in which young people are really positioned to do their very best work. This school year, we've had a variety of drills, we've had a variety of situations, as well as just thinking about the overall health of our young people and our staff. So this is a really timely workshop. These are good reminders for the things that we currently do, the things that we want to stress to students and staff and to families, and just an opportunity to make sure that you hear from us around the work that's happening on a daily basis to make sure that our entire school community is safe, secure, and healthy in being able to do what we expect them to do, whether it's just a regular school day or in case if there ever is, God forbid, an emergency. We want to make sure we're well prepared to manage any of the different challenges that may arise. I'm really grateful for all the work that our entire staff does, and in particular, the three individuals who are going to be offering some information as well as some tidbits and strategies. First, we'll have Mr. Brian Moran, our assistant principal for safety and security, as well as physical education, but his main focus tonight will be around safety and security. He'll be followed by Ms. Casey Pedrick, our AP for pupil personnel, who'll be talking around the counseling aspect and support that we want young people to have throughout on a regular school day, but also in cases of any emergencies or any situations that may arise. And you'll also hear from Ms. Dina Ingram, our school business manager and our director of family engagement, who's going to talk about our communication, which is a really integral part in making sure that you are well-versed on the things and information and updates that you need to hear to make sure that you are well versed in the things that the school is doing and any updates that may arise. But really excited for tonight to be able to share lots of the information that we have. Again, these are things that we do on a daily basis. You'll hear some of the protocols that we follow and that we practice. But most importantly, these are just good reminders around everything that happens on a regular school day that we want students and families and staff to be well aware of. And again, I think tonight will be really informative. We'll take some question and answers or do that at the very end just to make sure that we are responding to some of the concerns and or questions that you may need or have and offering some clarity around that. But again, excited to be here tonight and excited to offer lots of information that we want to make sure that you are well aware of. So let me hand it over now to our assistant principal, Mr. Moran, who's going to talk a little bit about our emergency protocols.
Thank you, Principal Yu, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Obviously, something that we all take very seriously here at Stuyvesant. Our #1 priority is the safety and well-being of all of our students and staff. The first thing that I'd like to do is to review some of our protocols. Tomorrow, all of the students in homeroom will be reviewing with their teachers these protocols as well. We do drill frequently, all of these protocols as well. What I have been reminding teachers prior to tomorrow's, in leading up into tomorrow's homeroom activity is students' #1 job is not to understand every single protocol. It's to follow the directives of the teacher. So our staff are trained, drilled, reminded of all of these practices. I think it is a good idea for students to have an understanding. I think it will help with some of the anxiety and stress around these drills, or in the event that we do have an emergency situation, to have an understanding of how to react in these situations. But by no means are we expecting students to be pros at this, especially younger freshmen, maybe sophomores, people who are new to the building. So really what we want students though to understand is to look to their teacher, and in the event of a drill or an emergency is to just to follow the directives of the teacher and to work as one to make sure that everyone is first on the same page and then obviously as safe as possible. So a lockdown is a procedure where there's a threat inside the building. We have two different versions of a lockdown. It's a hard and soft lockdown. The drills, we always practice a soft lockdown, which means we have staff members in the hallways checking that all of the classroom doors are locked, all the lights are turned off, people are away from the windows and doors, there's no talking, there's nobody in the hallways, there's no one in any open or unlocked spaces. This is in the event that there is a threat inside of the building, and we want to get people locked away from public spaces as quickly as possible. So we are drilling these lockdowns mostly so that staff can respond quickly as possible to move students into those spaces. Different times of day, it could be during a lunch or a free period, it could be during passing when everyone's in the hallways, could be before or after school. So we try to be as efficient as possible in getting students behind a locked door to make sure that they're out of harm's way. That also includes making sure that all of our PA system works in every room. Our doors all have working locks. So every time we drill, we're also not only preparing students and staff, we're making sure that all of the physical space is prepared to be able to, doors work, locks work, things like that as well. So for students, obviously following directions is the #1 priority, but we want to get out of those common areas or out of those open areas into a classroom where we're locking the doors, turning the lights off, and getting out of sight and as quickly as possible. So that is the lockdown procedure. Okay, an evacuation, also sometimes called a fire drill. For staff, they are responsible for their class. So each teacher will direct their class to follow the evacuation route. All of those are posted in each classroom, and the teachers are aware of those routes. Students, again, their job is to follow their teacher, to move as quickly and quietly as possible, but it's not a race, obviously. We have to, unfortunately, leave our belongings behind in the event of a real evacuation. If there was a gas leak or if there was a fire in the building, we don't have time for students to go to their lockers. What that means is if you are in phys ed and you are in your shorts and a t-shirt, or if you forgot your jacket on the 9th floor, you aren't going to have a chance to go get it in that moment. That is unfortunate when we have a drill or in the event that we do have to evacuate, but we are looking to clear the building as quickly as possible in those scenarios. We'll make whatever accommodations for students that we can, but obviously we can't have classes or students running to their lockers in those events. They need to stay with their teacher. For the conversations that you're having, or for students that are on this call as well, or conversations you're having with your children, very important that everyone tries to stay with their teacher, remains quiet and listens for instruction. There are times where we redirect classes or groups of students based on the time of day, or if certain exits are more crowded than others, or if a certain area of the building is off limits for whatever reason, maybe part of the emergency, we may need to redirect people. So they need to be listening and aware of their surroundings. It's also a good time to remind everyone, we do have a policy of no headphones for students in the school building. This is the main reason why, is we want students to quickly be able to first hear emergency announcements, or in this case, the fire alarm bells. We want them to be able to hear if there's directions being given. There are many times where we walk down the hallway or we try talking to students and they can't hear you because their head is in a laptop or they have headphones on, and we need people to be able to respond quickly, to be responsive and also aware of what's going on around them. So that is an evacuation. We'll get to the next one, which is a shelter in. I'm quickly going through these. Obviously, when teachers and students review this, they'll go a little bit more into detail, but and be able to ask questions. But the main way that we prepare, it's obviously a layered approach of trying to prepare for any kind of an emergency, including this discussion tonight. But drilling is the best way for us to prepare for any kind of an emergency. So that's why we ask, anytime we're in one of these drills, whether it's a lockdown or fire drill, shelter in, we ask everyone to take it seriously, because that is where we're preparing and making sure that everything is operating smoothly and working correctly. But it also helps if students take it seriously. In the event that something does happen, we are more prepared to respond. A shelter in is a situation where a threat may be outside of the school building, and we want to avoid any threat that's outside the building making its way inside the building. In this case, all of the exits and doors will be locked and secured. We have staff that are assigned to each exit in the building. What that means is, for students that may have a lunch period or free period, they may not be allowed to go outside, students or staff for that matter. Different times of day, this is a challenge based on where that student or staff member may be. If it is in the morning or in the afternoon during entry or dismissal, obviously that would be a challenge. If it is in the middle of the day during our lunch periods where some people may be outside, including students, that is also a challenge. So for students and staff inside the building, it is a business as usual situation. They just won't be permitted to leave. For students or staff who are outside the building, they may not be able to get access back inside the building, and we would ask them to seek shelter in a local establishment or business. In the slides, we have a few suggestions, such as there's Whole Foods, there's McDonald's, there's a public library, all public spaces that our students are very familiar with, which are very close by, and they can seek shelter there until the shelter in is lifted or they're able to get access back to the school building. All right, the next one. A hold. This is a relatively new procedure. So a hold situation is kind of a combination between a shelter in and a lockdown. In a hold situation, we're continuing with business as usual. So there's teaching and learning. Students and teachers may talk, have regular classroom activities. The only difference with a hold is if and when the period ends, students wouldn't change class. So we are gonna clear the hallways while we're trying to resolve whatever issue it may be. We're gonna ask everyone just to hold tight in whatever room they are in until we've deemed it appropriate for classes to change and for everyone to enter into the hallways again. The hold response is typically one, it may last just a few minutes. If we were looking for a particular student, it could last a little bit longer. So the class, but again, it is teaching and learning goes on business as usual. For this one is mostly for staff, but again, students just follow the directives of their classroom teacher. Okay, thank you. Next one. Some of the best practices, I already mentioned a little bit about headphones inside of the school. We use the PA system for a majority of our response protocols, and students and staff need to be able to hear them and respond appropriately. So the headphones is a big one, especially now that winter is coming and winter is here. It's very cold outside. When students are coming into the building, we ask that they remove their hoods or their hats so that we can see who they are when they're coming in. All students have to scan their IDs when they enter the building. That's how we first capture their attendance, but also assure that they're an active Stuyvesant student. For anyone who's ever dropped their child off around 7:45 to 8:15, there's a sea of students coming into the school. We have a number of staff, including school safety, the administration, and other staff members who greet students every morning at the bridge. But with that many people coming in that quickly, we really need students to be ready. So they have to have their IDs out. They should have their hats and hoods down just so we can see who they are as they're coming in and swiping their ID. And then they can go about their day once they've entered the building. But that is an important one, a good one just to mention to your children tonight and every day. Again, perfect timing with time of year as far as personal items, leaving items unattended. We happen to work and have a school that's such a terrific place where so many things get lost and found. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And sometimes it is a little bit of a false sense of security. Students will leave phones plugged in the hallway, leave them for a couple hours and come back and magically they'll still be there. They leave backpacks lying around. They leave a lot of things in the hallways and classrooms unattended. It's just not a good practice. We do have things that get lost. We do have things that get stolen. Please remind them, especially those electronic devices, cell phones, laptops, and those, secure them. Every student is given a locker. They have two lockers, really, one for phys ed and one in the hallway. They should utilize them, lock up their belongings. Plus, then they don't have to carry those giant backpacks around all day. So again, another good practice just to lock up or make sure that you don't leave things unattended. If you are outside of the building and we go into a shelter in or a lockdown, talk to your children, talk to your students about the different places so they're familiar. If they happen to be outside, even if it's a student who does not go outside for lunch, you know, a shelter in could happen during morning entry. It could happen before they get to school. So they should be familiar with the neighborhood. They should be familiar with some of the establishments that we've talked about, Brookfield Place, McDonald's, the library, Whole Foods. These are all places where students could seek shelter, stay away from the school where their potential issue may be, and they're much safer in that area until they get the all clear, in which Ms. Ingram will be talking about later as far as our communication. But we utilize email to all of our groups, students, staff, and parents. But in the event that there is an emergency at the school, they should look to one of these places to wait and hold up until they've given the all clear to return to the school. All right. Okay, I think we had a question before I get to traveling tips. Let me just see.
I think we were going to hold our questions until the end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
okay.
If I could just add real quick, you mentioned the different places to go and having a plan there. And this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Students should share what their plan is with their family members. Parents should really make that plan with their students if they're outside. And this would include having an emergency plan if you have to evacuate. Mr. Moran mentioned, we'll mention later about we have evacuation sites, but what is your plan as a family to meet up? And also take a look at the Big Sib handbook so that they get to know the area well. Even some simple things as to having a backup on your phone for if you don't have your student Metro card to get home, you know, to have Omni on there, even giving your kids emergency cash to carry for a cab if they can't take mass transit, or even just a power bank that they carry in their backpack to charge their phone. There's just simple emergency things to talk about at home.
Thank you, Ms. Ingram. So that also kind of ties in nicely with travel tips and when students are commuting to and from school. I, you know, travel myself on the subway and see everyday students in their phones, headphones on, sometimes in a book, sometimes in a laptop. It's really important that you be aware of your surroundings, but also not make yourself a target by having those things out. So certainly it's a time for students to catch up on schoolwork, to do some reading, to relax and listen to music. Unfortunately, those things don't necessarily provide for their safety. They really should, at least while they're in transit, meaning while they're walking to the subway or while they're waiting for that train car, they should make sure that they are aware of their surroundings. We certainly hope that students can find other classmates, other peers to travel in groups whenever possible. If that's a club or a sports team after school, if that's, you know, if they're in chorus, or if it means with their homeroom, making small talk and figuring out people who are on the same train line, people who live in the same neighborhood. Maybe they were lucky enough, some of the students from their middle school are now together with them at Stuyvesant. Whenever possible, travel together. I think that's certainly a really important thing, a really big way that students can provide for their safety is to just travel in groups. When you see something, say something. It sounds like such a simple, silly thing, but there are a lot of cases where things have happened and they're afraid to speak up. Whether that's in the moment, if someone is harassing them, or if that's after the fact, if something happens and reporting it. Many times, whether it's fear or just not knowing what the correct way to respond, students don't immediately report incidents that happen. So really encourage them to right away notify somebody. If it's in that moment, if they are nearby the school, return to the school. We have school safety and staff here as long as the building is open. If it's on the train or buses, they should, a police officer, an MTA worker. It's important to immediately notify someone so that a response and action can take place. Sounds like a simple thing. I please don't gloss over it, because it is something that we see time and time again, where students don't report something, or they try to just ignore something and think it will go away. Make a big deal about it. Go directly to the ticket booth. Go directly to an MTA or police officer, or come back to the school and let us know. Don't try to ignore it or think the person will leave you alone or go away. They really should just, if something happens, if you see something, say something right away. Being alert to your surroundings and staying in populated areas. This is something, again, if they are traveling to and from school, they have their route that they're traveling. But students also tend to hang out around the school building, even after hours or even during school hours, during lunchtime. Just, again, to be smart about where you are and not to be in a position where you may be isolated or by yourself. All right.
Yeah. Mr. Moran, let me just chime in as well for a few points. Mr. Moran made mention about, practicing of drills, and I can't reiterate how important that is. God forbid there is an emergency. This is what these protocols are intended for, is to be able to make sure that we can get an entire school of more than 3,300 students, 220 plus staff to be able to work in unison. These drills are tremendously important. It's important that our young people are aware when we do have these drills that they're following directions of our staff. And as Mr. Moran made mention, he is our BRT, our building response leader. So he's always taking notes when we run these drills about the things that we need to improve on, as well as the timing when we evacuate. So there are a number of different factors and considerations that happen. These are drills to get people, the entire school community, to be able to follow directions and to be able to do the things that are required when we're, if we're in a shelter in or for an evacuation, any of the things that we may, have to have. But the other key thing that I really want to stress is the best practices and travel commuting tips. God forbid we ever have an emergency, but if we do, these, and hopefully these emergencies are very few and far between. But the travel and commuting tips, the best strategies or best practices, those happen on a daily basis. So just being aware and vigilant. We're in New York City, so clearly there's, any city, there's always an opportunity for something to happen, which is why going to and from school, being in groups of students is really important. We're very fortunate to be in the Tribeca area. We've got a number of businesses. This is why when we, beginning of the year, throughout the year, at the end of the year, we make relationships with Whole Foods, with Barnes and Noble. They know our students. They know if we have a lot of students who are mingling at the Starbucks or at Whole Foods. We get word of that. So this is good. This is our building of relationships, because we do know if there are ever emergencies or if there are ever any situations that we've got a number of partners and community groups and companies who recognize that we're located here. And fortunately, we're also near City Hall and the Department of Education. So they have eyes on us as well. So when we think about the safety and overall security of the school, we have some things going for us because of our location and proximity. That's not to say we're immune to, any emergencies or, any issues, but we're in a better situation than most places. And which is why, again, as we're talking about the drills and we're talking about these best practices and tips, these are things that we all have to take personal responsibility, both individually and collectively. And again, our goal is to make sure we minimize any of these situations so that, our students feel secure when they come to school.
There seems to be a few questions about students if they are outside during lunch or when and how communication would reach those students. So previously we did have a text notification system. We've moved towards email. It's been far more effective for a number of reasons. The text notification system did not work extremely well. Most notably was a lot of students not downloading the app because it's up to the individual to download and allow us to have the access to that push notification. So I know Ms. Ingram can speak a little bit more when she talks about communication. Our students are very tuned in and our staff are very tuned in with email. And we've been using that with some success, a lot of success, I believe, with our students and our staff. And that's also the expectation. So in the event that there is any kind of an emergency, students and staff should check their email.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. So we're going to talk a little bit more about communication. As brought out in the top of our slide there, our top priority every day is the safety and security and well-being of our students, and then of course our staff and our families. So we know that staying informed is of utmost importance to our families, especially when there is an emergency. So anytime that our building response team is put in motion, my first point of report is the principal's office, our command center, and the crafting of communication and getting details begins immediately, but not before that first bullet point there, that we're acting as quickly to get as much information available, and we're notifying the key partners, our safety agents, NYPD, Manhattan Superintendent's Office. So Mr. Moran and Principal Yu are involved in that process of getting our students to safety first. And that is really of utmost importance. So the order of our communication is to staff and students, first internally and as quickly as we can, and then to families. And in the interim, there is ongoing communication with all these other necessary parties that are involved in this, whether it be NYPD or school safety, the DOE. So our goal is to send out communication as soon as possible when applicable to the situation. That means that some isolated incidents that are not deemed necessary to alert the whole school community are not necessarily communicated to the community at large. But when there is a situation that does need our entire school community to be notified, as soon as we have the accurate information to send, we really do our best to keep the community informed. And we are doing that, as Mr. Moran said, through email. Previously, when we had an application for push notifications, not many were downloading it to phones, and phones were offloading it, so it wasn't getting much use. So we're finding that those immediate emails are very useful. So that's why it's so important to us that we have at least one email address for each family member that we can communicate with you through email. So it's really important, especially during an emergency, that we take the time that we need to address the immediate situation. And so that may mean that we're unable to take your immediate calls or answer your emails actually during an emergency situation, because we're keeping your children safe and our staff safe. But we are sending that communication out. When it is sent, there then may be other considerations that the administration may have to make decisions upon, such as dismissal or after-school activities, sports, other decisions. And then we'll send subsequent updates. Principal Yu and Mr. Moran are reviewing each communication that is sent out to our families. So although it may seem like a very long time, it usually is not an enormously long time that has passed. We just ask for your patience and your continued patience when we're crafting that information, because it's important that we get it accurate. But we are always trying to provide as much information as we can to the situation to update our families, even if it's not the specifics We've had many questions sometimes about why don't we know exactly why there was an evacuation or a shelter in. But we do ask for some trust. We're giving as much information as possible that's applicable to this situation as we can. And I don't know if Mr. Moran or Principal Yu want to add anything to the communication piece before we move on to Ms. Pedrick.
I think that's important. Just to, one more time, just to go through again, we are, like Ms. Ingram said, we are gathering information. We are trying to put out things that are as accurate and concise as possible. Things also change rather quickly in these situations. Like Ms. Ingram said, we are coordinating with NYPD, other agencies, school safety. So there are a lot of moving parts in these types of situations. We will try to send an initial communication as quickly as possible, and then follow that up maybe with something a little bit more detailed, including, you know, what may be the result, whether after school activities or things of that nature, how those things are affected. Please just have patience and understand that our only concern is the safety and well-being of our students and staff. And that's our initial thought and our initial action, while Dina is sitting there crafting all of these emails, and we're trying to do that as quickly as possible as well. So just to keep that in mind as we go through, and in the event that we have these types of situations. I just wanted to take a second just to thank Ms. Ingram as well. We are very lucky to have her and how quickly and efficiently we send out communication to 8,000 people, and even more when we consider the students and the staff. It's really a huge lift, and it's really a great job that Ms. Ingram does. So thank you, Dina.
Thanks, Mr. Moran. But we're going to talk a little bit about well-being, another part of safety, with Ms. Pedrick.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll build upon what Mr. Moran just said and say that the 4 floating heads on your screen, we are very level-headed people. So when situations do happen at our schools, your students are in good hands with the 4 people you see on the screen, as well as many, many, many of our staff members who are able to navigate these uncertain moments with grace and with having your child's well-being at the front of their thought process. So, of course, when we have safety protocols where actual drills occurring, it's very normal for students and parents alike to feel fear, anxiety, and stress. So what I'm going to chat about is, of course, the school counselors are thinking about your students when all of this is going on. We immediately will come together after these events and say, what is it that we need to do to support the students and processing what we're doing. So in part, that's what we're doing in tomorrow's homeroom. So to keep it full circle, here are some tips to start a healing conversation with your teen when they're home. So you can go to the next one. And I actually animated it, Ms. Ingram, so I'm keeping your pointer finger busy during this one. So
you threw me there when I went.
So we all just got done having some holidays with our families. So we're very aware that listening skills don't come naturally to everybody. So we're not at all thinking that these are conversations that are going to feel natural to you to have with your child. And we want for all 4 years of high school, as well as beyond or before, to maintain an open dialogue with your child and be able to have these kind of check-ins. So it will feel less unnatural when these things happen, and you want to have these discussions. First and foremost, as the adult in these child's lives, we are going to want to check in with ourselves first and just kind of take stock of our own stress and anxiety and what we may be projecting into a conversation unknowingly if we don't check ourselves. So since as adults, we have more experiences under our belt than our children do, we just want to think about those things because your student might have a clear understanding of the level of danger, or maybe negatively affected by your reactions and emotions. This is where we want to do just the quiet listening part, which I think is what the next bullet point indicates. Yes, okay. So, of course, a school counselor wants you to ask your child how they are feeling. Again, is this a natural conversation for most people? No, it definitely takes practice. So give yourself grace as you're doing this. Ask them how they're feeling. And if they do report having anxiety or other distress related to the safety protocol drill, listen. It's so hard. You do want to jump in. You do want to share your own experiences, or you do want to share words of comfort. But the best thing to do with your child is just listen and start to, hear the things that they're going to come out with. I know there's many parents who are in the audience right now going, I'd love to listen if they would only talk, but that's another Zoom. So validate their feelings. That's another really wonderful tool that you can do as a parent. So you're listening to them and then you're letting them know, yeah, that does sound like it was very stress inducing, or yeah, that sounds like, my heart would be racing too. That was absolutely a normal reaction that you had today. It's okay to feel worried. And then you as the adult with all those extra experiences under your belt can provide information to help get their fears into context if they feel a little maybe out of balance. And then as we've already talk about the safety protocols that are in place. That Mr. Moran, he has many years under his belt. He's dealt with a lot of these things. He knows what he's doing. It's okay. We can put some confidence in the principal and Mr. Moran, who are making the best decisions for your safety. So the law enforcement, when they do get involved in certain situations, are also doing that exact same thing. How can we secure the place? How can we get these students back in? So let them know that the adults here are here to support them. So we'll go to the next one. Okay. If you are tuned into your child and you're watching and you're feeling like anxiety is persisting, and this goes with anything. We're talking about this from a safety protocol standpoint, but this is just going to be in regular day-to-day as well. So signs to watch for include the changes in their mood. Yes, teenagers have mood swings, so it's going to be on you to discern whether this is their normal teenage mood swing, you're the most annoying person in their life at that moment, or if in fact there's increase in anxiety, increase in irritability, increase in sadness. Are they withdrawing from relationships? Are they stopping hanging out with certain friends that you become familiar with, or stop going to a certain club that they used to really enjoy the camaraderie with? Are they being unusually clingy to you? Or is it getting to a point where they're refusing to attend school? They're suddenly having difficulty concentrating. Are they sharing with you when you're doing your check-ins with them and you're listening that they're having intrusive or reoccurring worries, nightmares at night, that type of thing? Then a lot of our stress and anxiety can manifest in a physical way. So we want to be tuned into those things too. Are they complaining of headaches? Are they having more stomach aches? Are they more tired? Do they feel more restless to you? So you can think about those things. So if those things that we've just listed or any other changes that you're tuned into as their mama or dada persist for more than a few days, and you want to think about seeking out the support of a therapist, please do not hesitate to reach out for a second to our licensed clinical social worker, Ms. Arlene Novarese, if you'd like to have a referral for therapy. She is at the regular Stuyvesant number. She's extension 2366. You can reach her there. So she's a great resource there. She can see what kind of insurance that you have, where's your zip code, maybe there's some in-school things that are worthy of matching them up with, etc. So don't hesitate to reach out to her. She's great there. Please know that your child is hooked up with a school counselor for all 4 years that they are at school. The counseling suite is on the second floor. That's the main floor that they enter and exit out of. So it's a little home base for them anyway. We're in room 236. You don't need an appointment. It's great if you want to make one, but if there's just times when you want to walk into 236 and go see your counselor, please also know that all of our counselors have a buddy system, so that if your child's current counselor is engaged with another student at the time in an IEP meeting or something, that they do have a buddy who Miles, the receptionist, will be able to address them to. And you're always welcome to contact myself or Arlene. I mentioned her extension is 2366. My extension is the easiest, 2222, and that is my office number too. So your children are welcome to swing on by, or you're welcome to reach out. Dr. Yu?
So thanks, Ms. Pedrick. And just for everyone, Ms. Pedrick's been under the weather, so the fact that she's even here was a testament just how important recognizing just overall well-being of the entire school. We wanted to talk about it on all levels. A few things that I just want to kind of add before we get into some of the Q&A. One is that, over the course of the last 2.5 years, we continue to make adjustments. So things that we've had to learn pre-COVID, during COVID, and now hopefully on the tail end, we've made adjustments throughout, whether it's our communication, whether it's the ways in which we're thinking about the social emotional, whether it's thinking about the drills, everything that we have, experienced over the 2.5 years is constant improvements and trying to make adjustments based upon the different things that we're learning. So just, a few examples, this year when we came back, last year when we were in person and coming, back fully, we wanted to make sure we had additional support. So Mr. Moran advocated for an extra dean. We wanted to make sure we had that support for any types of emergencies. We are having now homeroom once a month. So Ms. Pedrick is looking at her team and counseling, thinking about what is it that we need to do to make sure that we are building those connections to ensure that young people feel safe and secure, healthy overall, thinking about the ways in which we can really support them. This is why we work with counseling in schools for the additional social worker, as well as Robin and the different organizations that we continue to think about partnering with so that we can support our young people on every facet. And then of course the communication, I think if anything, we've given you tons of communication, but just even the ways that we're doing it through emergencies, recognizing that, 1 year we've tried the text, we're making, this year, we're continually go with emails. We're constantly reassessing, and we meet on a weekly basis just to talk about all the things that are happening throughout the school. So, when we get the feedback, when we hear from you, these are heard because we're constantly meeting. We do the safety meeting once a month. We're meeting with, again, the PA safety subcommittee as well to make sure that we're staying in tune, as well as through SLT. So all of these different conversations, I want to just continue to stress, when we hear it, we regroup and we think about the ways in which we can continuously improve. So at the end of the day, every student and staff member goes home safely and then comes back the next day. That's our ultimate goal, and we can't stress that enough. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ingram, who's going to facilitate a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, so we thank everyone who submitted questions in advance. We're going to start with those, and then we're going to try to also answer some that were submitted tonight in the Q&A. But we have some questions that we want to pay attention to because you did take the time to submit them in advance. And some of those were also worked into our presentation. So if you submitted a question, you don't hear it now, you may have heard the answer already in the presentation tonight. And maybe Mr. Moran, this is a quick one you can answer. Are there safety agents outside the building, and are there supervised cameras?
So don't tell the students where all the cameras are. Yes, we have cameras. The cameras are limited in what they can help provide as far as safety. We do have school safety. They are present for entry and dismissal. We do the best we can. Obviously, we have all of our students traveling from all 5 boroughs. So like Principal Yu said earlier today, we're pretty lucky down in Tribeca. When they're here, they're safe, but they are traveling throughout the 5 boroughs. They're on trains, they're on buses. So they extend well beyond our reach, and that's the importance of having those ongoing conversations with your children. But yes, we do have school safety. We do have cameras. Lower Manhattan has a lot of cameras. But as far as providing for immediate safety, the tips that we gave tonight, I think are equally, if not more important.
Thank you. So if there is a true emergency and remaining in the school building is not deemed necessary or possible, is there a designated evacuation site, and what would be the procedure for notifying parents?
Yes, so we do have a safety plan. It's created and submitted along with the NYPD and in coordination with the NYPD. It's a secure document. It's not something that can be published or shared. What I can tell you is we have multiple relocation sites. It would depend on the nature of the incident and certainly availability of where we would be traveling to. That is where communication would come into place as far as where we are going and where and how you would, the reunification plan with your children. So unfortunately, we're not able to share the details of that, but that would be one of those things that obviously would change from situation to situation and would be communicated in the event that we had to relocate.
Yeah. And let me just stress too, the safety plan is done once a year or every school year, and it has to be vetted through the NYPD. So, even with these evacuation sites, this is something that Mr. Moran has to follow up every year to confirm that the sites understand that there are that designated evacuation site and vice versa. So these are constant communication that we have to continue to have in case, and God forbid, there ever is a reason for us to have to actually evacuate the site to a different location. And again, all that communication would go out if there were reunification plans. And if in case we were to have that, all that communication would go out, but not until an actual event like that happens, so that we can make sure that that information remains private until it needs to be made public to students and families and staff.
And I will add, just as far as how it would be communicated, we discussed earlier primarily through the email. If we were in an evacuation site, I do have the ability to use our phone system. So we will try to get hold of you no matter what. And we are set up to engage parents either, whether it be through email, which is quicker, which is why we use it in emergencies, or in the phone system that we would take more time to do so in. Okay, and one more, and then we'll move to some of the questions in the Q&A. Since the Tribeca Bridge is in use by anybody, how can we protect STI students on the Tribeca Bridge? Maybe you can give us some details as to jurisdiction over the bridge.
Yeah, so it is a public walkway, that's true, but it is the egress that our school community uses. We have school staff and school safety present, like I said, at entry and dismissal every day. So the bridge is, technically a public space, but it is very much a part of Stuyvesant. It connects directly to our second floor bridge entrance. So, it is part of our security, and it is part of our, we are aware of the things that are going on in and around the entire neighborhood, but especially on the bridge.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. There was a question also about students being able to return in the middle of free periods, and if that would be safer than having them remain outside. Could you explain the policy on?
Yeah, that's a good question, and certainly something that we can continue to discuss. The question is, when students go outside during their lunch period, they are allowed to go out throughout the period, but we only have students return at the last 10 minutes of the class, of the period. And that's because of the coming and going being a little bit of an issue. When students exit during their lunch period, we have them scan out, so we are aware who is outside of the building at any given time. And when they return, they scan back in, and we are then aware that everybody safely returned back into the building. To have students both coming and going throughout the period, it becomes a little bit of a little bit more difficult to manage. So we made the decision to allow students to, let's say, go meet with a teacher or go to the library or do something for the first part of the period and then still be able to go outside and pick something up for lunch or enjoy the fresh air. But we have students only coming back in within the last 10 minutes. Now, if there were ever any kind of a situation where there was any reason or safety reason or danger outside of the building, we would certainly immediately allow students back in. But on a day-to-day basis, we do have students only coming back in at the end of the period returning from lunch.
Let me just chime in also about what Mr. Moran said about scanning in. So we have a system called CAS in which the student IDs are so important, which is why we tell our young people to make sure that they have it, because they actually have to scan in, and our software, or the CAS software, shows their face and lets us know that they're students. And as Mr. Moran said, whether they're swiping in or swiping out, this allows us to keep track of where students are. Again, part of what makes Stuyvesant both amazing and as well as complicated is, we have the free periods, we have the lunch. We want young people and to trust young people and to try to keep them safe as possible, which is why we allow kids to go outside. But part of what we always grapple with is just around our ability to be able to monitor everything at any given time, particularly with the scanning coming in and out, which is why we set these policies so that we can do it in a way that allows us to be at our very best. Similarly, as Mr. Randy may mention about the morning time, part of the scanning system is also to serve as another barrier for safety. So we have our safety agents stationed in a lot of different places, but two of the primary locations are right at the entrances, our main entrance as well as the bridge. So we have double doors. And so again, anytime we think about intruders, our goal is to make sure that they don't get past these barriers, which is why we have them placed, why we have the safety agents placed where they are. It's why we have our CAS system. So, as a Tribeca Bridge being what it is, sometimes there's accidents where people come in and thinking that this is the way because they don't see the staircase right before the Stuyvesant entrance. So if they get through our doors, through our double doors, then they see our staff members and our safety agents, which is we're able to stop them there. So these are all things that we do in terms of including our processes around when kids can come back in during a free period or lunch, is because we want to make sure that we can monitor with the adults at these locations at those specific times to ensure that we are doing everything we can to keep everyone safe.
Thank you both. So do the faculty and staff of the school scan IDs to get in, and any visitor to the school, how are they checked in at the entrance?
Yeah, so we all staff also have to have their ID. I have mine right here on my keys. I think Principal Yu has his there too.
Yeah, sorry.
So even the principal and myself, we are showing our ID when we come in the morning. Just like I'm sure most of you, if you work in an office building, a hospital, or a law office, or anywhere really, I think most of us are used to having to show some sort of ID. So yes, and the sign-in procedure, any guests, guest speakers, visitors to the building must be signed in with school safety. They must show valid state ID in order to gain entrance. We utilize the CAS system as well, where we provide them with passes so that unfamiliar faces as they're walking through the hallway are also visible with a guest pass. So yes, we do certainly have a sign-in procedure, and all the staff also have their IDs.
Yep. And one thing to add, so when we have these performances or events at nighttime or any of the things after school, and we ask our visitors, including our families, to showcase some form of identification, or even if we're asking you to show your COVID or your vaccination, these are processes that we are putting in place for this very reason. We try not to, we can't pick and choose when it's convenient or when it's not. These are all the procedures because emergencies can happen when, after school hours, which is why we also put a permit in to make sure we have safety agents. So there are a number of different things that we do to ensure that anytime students and staff are in the building, we are doing our very best to keep it as safe as possible. So again, families, when we do have these events, and I know at times it could be an inconvenience to wait, but we're doing it for these very reasons. And when we're asked to keep everyone as safe as possible, we ask everyone to be understanding about, we don't get to pick and choose. We do it so that we can be consistent as much as possible, so that we can make sure we're following these processes and procedures, just like we ask everyone else to follow.
Thank you. So will NYPD always get notified and be involved if the school were to receive bomb threats?
Yeah, so again, this is part of our protocol. Obviously, like we said earlier, we are always going to be in communication with NYPD, and not only in communication, but coordinating with NYPD for any type of emergency, whether it's a hoax or any kind of situation. So the short answer is yes, we're always in coordination. There was a second question that I'll tie into with the NYPD. I've been here for a while now. We've been able to really cultivate a good working relationship with the NYPD and with the 1st Precinct. There was a question about any type of classes or things that the NYPD might do that could involve our school. We are hosting the NYPD Explorers Club. They are a group of high school students who are considering law enforcement as a career, and they've been using our school building. They've been having meetings. They've been having some of their tests. They will be actually here on this Friday. We've invited them to open houses, and every once in a while they're out on the bridge or in the building. They set up a tabletop and try to recruit students to the programs like the Explorers. If your child is interested in something like that, maybe as a career or maybe just as something to have another experience under their belt, it's certainly a program that would be worth looking into, and we are trying to cultivate that relationship with the NYPD, with the 1st Precinct. And I always feel like the more things that we can have hosting them, the better. And it just helps us to develop that relationship, keep the communication open, and certainly whenever we need them, they're always there as well. So we try to reciprocate whenever we can.
So does the school safety staff patrol outside of the school and the entrances during the day?
Yes, they do. Mostly during entry and dismissal, but throughout the day, when we do have the ability to, school safety and school staff will do a perimeter check of the building. Obviously, because our students, we're not talking about just a schoolyard. They are welcome to go out to any establishment in the neighborhood. So it is typically just the perimeter of the school that we patrol. So students, the further away you get from the building, kind of the more on their own they may be. But certainly whether it's the park across the street or the basketball courts or the Tribeca Bridge, we are monitoring those areas. Battery Park also has a security, their own public security, public safety. It's Allied Universal. So they are patrolling this area all the time as well.
Thank you. A number of questions came in. I just want to repeat again about how would students know if the school goes into a shelter-in or a lockdown and they're outside for a free period or lunch. I just want to, again, make mention that we do so through email. They would check their phones. If they got back to the school and they can't get in, the first thing they should do is look at their phone and look at their stuyvesant.edu, because there's most definitely an email there that would let them know why they're being stopped at the door. And then they should head to one of those secure locations. Relating to that is a question about if there is a shelter in when a student is outside and not allowed to come back, what's the procedure to get excused for their next class's absence? And hopefully teachers are not giving tests right after the shelter in that they might need to be made up. So I just want to make mention that if we are in a shelter in or hold, that, shouldn't be concerned about them getting marked absence, because the teacher will know why they're not, most likely not there. But I can go hand it off to Ms. Pedrick that can talk a little bit about how the counselor will help them to communicate with the teachers and get their work and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes students are proactive and reach out to the teachers on their own if they're feeling a little reticent about that. That's one of the things that the counselors can be there to help them to craft an email or to come up with the words to be able to communicate with their teachers. Then if you happen to get a teacher who's just giving a little challenge to the student, the school counselor can be able to help the student navigate that and go through what the higher system is for them.
So while you still are not on mute, you can take on this question, Pedrick. So although not a building safety issue, are there programs in place at Stuyvesant to address safety and mental well-being related to social media use?
Ooh, well, if you are a parent of a senior, sophomore, or freshman, they will have received, or as a freshman will be receiving, a freshman seminar. The poor junior class got a COVID hiccup there with theirs, but all the other classes, that is one of our programs that we deliver in the freshman seminar to help them with social media safety, awareness, responsibility, things to be aware that they're looking at or following, as well as the things that they are posting themselves and some of the ramifications of that. And it is a program that we have done in consultation with upperclassmen. And so they are the ones who help us update it every single year. And along with the counselor, will deliver that message to the students. So sometimes it feels a little better for the freshmen to hear that from upperclassmen as opposed to the adults, but the adults are right there.
Thank you, Ms. Pedrick. Mr. Moran, could self-defense be an elective offered for physical education?
We already have a Stuyvesant boxing class as an elective. I was trying to think if there were any other classes that might fit self-defense. I think anything where you're improving your level of fitness, your confidence. So a lot of classes could fit self-defense, but we do have a boxing class, which if you're a junior or a senior, your child may sign up for this coming spring. As far as partnerships with outside organizations, in order for phys ed credit to be granted, it has to be taught by a licensed teacher. So unfortunately, we're not able to partner with outside organizations for phys ed credit, but they can get it for free right here at Stuyvesant. So Mr. Barban is really an expert. It's a great class. The students who take it really enjoy it and learn a lot. So I encourage you to take a look at it when you're doing your electives for next semester.
Thank you. So we've had a couple of incidents in the last month or so, and we did discuss how NYPD does get involved in things, but are the police investigating any phone or electronic threats or pranks?
Yeah, so anything, first of all, every prank, every threat, everything is taken seriously. Everything is reported and investigated. I can't comment on any kind of investigations, but the short answer to that is yes.
Okay. So also another question is about two strangers, or any strangers really we can address, that are able to get inside the building. Do we report it to the police, and how do we address it?
So I know, Principal, you mentioned earlier that it is not infrequent with just the nature of how the bridge and the entrance to the bridge entrance is, that, it's a public space, public walkway. A person who comes in, it happens quite honestly, people mistake us for BMCC. They think it's a passageway through to the park or across the bridge. It happens occasionally, but like Principal Yu said, that's why we have the staff there, including school safety and our school staff, and the sign-in procedure. So in the event that somebody comes in and they are reminded that this is a school and turn around and walk out, that is not an intruder, okay? If the person refuses to leave, that person would be trespassing. If the person runs past us and into the building, that would be an intruder, and we would then activate our response protocols, which would in all likelihood be a lockdown until we were able to determine what that person was doing, trying to come into the building without permission. But in the occasions when people make a mistake or even if they are intentionally trying to come in, if they turn around and walk out, that's not an intruder. And that is the vast majority of cases where we have, people coming in across the bridge. So I think the question, what was the second part of the question? If there is NYPD contacted? If the person is compliant, if they are not trespassing. So if I mistakenly go to a school or into a place that I don't belong and I, turn around and walk out, I'm not trespassing. If I refuse to leave, I'm now trespassing, and we would call police in that case.
Yeah, just something to stress as well, as Mr. Moran said, I think it's important also just to think about the terminology, because, again, if someone walks into the double doors, again, we're a public institution. We do have our doors unlocked in those main entrances for people to come in. We have different barriers just for these very reasons. We have radios, which I have right here, which we use very frequently. And oftentimes if you see any of us, all the administrators have it, and this is ways that we communicate with one another. I think, again, as we think about the ways in which we work with our agencies, NYPD, all of those, the different groups, again, I think anytime, if we were to have an intruder inside the building, and as Mr. Moran said, we go into a lockdown, we have to go through those emergency procedures. We work closely with the NYPD. Again, we have to file the report. But when there are not those cases, and we have someone who doesn't break through the barriers, all of that, then again, it's not one that we report. It's one that we have prevented. What we do, however, is we have that relationship with both their safety agents as well as NYPD, the local precinct. We're constantly in communication, and again, letting them know, hey, is there possible to get maybe some extra patrols or any of those? It's not something that we can always have, but it is time for when we get information, we always want to think about making sure that we at least make that request. And we've gotten the task force a number of different times when we've had, things that we want to be on the lookout for. But this is why that relationship with NYPD, with our local precinct, all of that is so important because of these very reasons. But when we do communicate out to the entire school community for any type of emergency or any type of incident, we do communicate that out. But we want to be sure that what we're sending out is accurate information. And we know that, because cell phones and because of, hearsay, oftentimes things get misconstrued or information is not accurate. So we want to make sure anything that does come out is accurate information that we deem that warrants a response to the entire school community.
Thank you. So we have a couple more, and then we're going to round up the evening. Mr. Moran, maybe there was a question about whether other entrances besides the bridge and the main are they locked or monitored by security?
Yes.
Thank you. And one question, I think this might be from the PA, can we raise funds to obtain more security or alarm systems at the school?
So as far as the physical building, whether that's cameras, doors, locks, alarms, that's all through the DOE. We're not able to put up our own camera systems, our own locks. If there was something that we could use that we felt would help provide for student safety, then I would have no problem communicating, and I would certainly go through the PA Safety Committee in any of those discussions. They've always been, very open, very generous with us. But the DOE is responsible for and provides to make sure that everything is in working order as far as the physical building. As far as staffing is concerned, the school safety are under the purview of NYPD. So staffing isn't directly related to DOE necessarily. It's a partnership. So we don't have full autonomy there either. Where we do have some flexibility is in our school staffing. So that's deans, school aides, secretaries, counselors, social workers, and I know Principal Yu, Ms. Pedrick, we have ongoing coordination and communication conversations with the PA, and in a lot of cases, there's been some assistance from them as well to help fill needs in those various areas. So again, we'll continue to ask those, ask for those help when we need it. So thank you to all the PA.
And the last question that we'll take tonight is sometimes children leave the school after 6 p.m. for activities at school, but if a parent can't arrive or maybe they're waiting outside, is it possible that this child can wait in the school?
Okay, so we have we have to put permits in for any after school activity. So every student who is inside the building has to be supervised. So if they are with a school-related activity, they are welcome to stay. Once that school-related activity ends, the students have to leave the building and they can't be left unsupervised inside the school building. So for example, if they are on the basketball team, they may practice until 6 or 6:30, but once the coach decides that practice is over, the entire team has to exit the building. They can't stay behind. But if they are here for a school related activity, they are welcome to stay. But as far as just hanging out in the building, waiting for a parent to arrive, they cannot be here unattended at that hour.
And I just want to add a little bit of advice, just, parent advice from Sty. If your child is waiting outside for perhaps you to pick them up, there are many neighboring businesses. If they don't feel safe on the street right there, and they can't come back into the school, or it's past 6 p.m. if our safety agents have left the building, there's delis. There's also all the buildings in our surrounding area, we're very fortunate, are all doorman buildings. So if they ever really felt that there was an unsafe situation outside, they can go into the lobby of one of the buildings. They all have doormen and speak to the doorman there. I make the walk back and forth through Battery Park, and knowing that if I ever feel unsafe, I could jump in a building and ask the doorman for some help. So that's just a tip to keep in mind. And I guess we're going to wrap up our evening. I don't know if Principal Yu would like to close out tonight.
I just want to say thank you to Ms. Ingram, Mr. Moran, Ms. Pedrick, and all of you for joining. Again, this workshop was intended to offer a little bit more information. This is something that we constantly want to make sure people are reminded of. It's good practice. We want to continue to communicate out the things that are happening in the school. I know that, again, if you're watching media or keeping track of what's happening across New York City, it's hard at times not to feel, unsafe. And so these are things of why we want to make sure that we're communicating out, that we're holding these workshops, giving best practices, tips, the things that we are doing to do our very best to keep everyone safe. I do want to just stress again, we do prioritize this. We work closely with our agencies, including our safety agents, our staff, and everyone to do our very best to keep everyone safe. We're not perfect, and there's no guarantees, but what I do know is we prioritize this. We've had lots of conversations in a number of different venues around safety and security and overall well-being. So again, if you have any concerns, don't hesitate to reach out, but please know we keep this top of mind and we want to make sure that everyone feels as safe as possible. And then again, as we close this, we want to make sure every student and staff member goes home safely at night and is able to return safely to school the next day. So with that being said, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to continued conversations and more presentations, I'm sure, down the road. So have a good night, everyone.
Night, everyone. Thanks so much. And yes, the presentation was recorded, and we will send it out in the weekly update. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.